Hello, Sex Therapy 101 friends. You notice I might have taken a break, but we're back and we're excited. And I'm really passionate about this new series that I'm going to be offering to all of you. I haven't disappeared. I've been working on some projects that are really meaningful to me. And one of those is a book for the public about my research about regarding long-term outcomes of consenting to unwanted sex, or duty sex, as we sometimes call it. And in doing that, adding to my own research over the year, you'll see my hair change, my face change, because these were all recorded over the course of a year. And I wanted to talk to experts about the cultural implications or cultural beliefs or the cultural ideas among different communities in the US that might protect people against negative outcomes and that might actually kind of promote people into some of the more negative outcomes. And that is the series I have to offer you. I'm really excited. It's been really meaningful to me. It's been enlightening to me. It's really helped me make sure that this book is what I want it to be for all of you. So with no ado, here we go. This is going to be the intro for the whole series. And I'll give you a little bit of a bio for each, and then we'll jump into the recording of the interview. This was an exciting interview for me with Betty Martin, who I don't know personally, who I've benefited personally, though, from her work, the way she teaches, what she's come up with. It's really helpful. It's novel, but it's simple. So I really hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Betty Martin has had her hands on people professionally for over 40 years. First as a chiropractor, and then upon retiring from that practice, she became a certified surrogate partner, a sacred intimate, and somatic sex educator. Her explorations in somatic-based therapy and practices informed her creation of the framework, The Wheel of Consent. I hope you buy her book. I hope you watch her free videos on her website, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
agreeing to chat with me.
sure.
And so I was hoping today, I could go through those, just, I think there's 7 questions, and just
Oh,
pick,
yeah.
pick
About
your
why
brain.
women are not happy or
I'll
something,
just pick your brain.
basically.
Right. It's like we had 1,300
Oh, so
women,
many reasons.
so many reasons. Yeah, we had 1,300 women say they didn't have a history of any sexual trauma, but they hate sex, basically. And
Hmm.
um, this pattern of I've agreed or consented to sex when I didn't want it over and over
Hmm.
and over.
Yeah,
And so I want your thoughts of how you think about this. I'm just wanting really to start a
sure.
conversation about what's this about. So that first question is, using your clinical lens of relationships and sexuality, what do you see happening in my research findings? How would you explain it to someone else about what's going on?
Um, yeah, first, I'm a clinician. I'm not a researcher. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a big database,
Mm-hmm.
but the people that I do work with, I've tended to work with quite intimately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the probably the reason most or of the women who don't like sex, the biggest reason is probably that the sex is not worth wanting.
Mm-hmm. Say more. I'm on board,
Yeah.
and I'm interested in your thoughts. Totally agree.
Um, because if it's not enjoyable and sensorially pleasing, who would want it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's the biggest thing. And the reason that they're not getting good sex is because number one, um, if they're with men, men largely have been systematically cut off from their own sensuality
Mm-hmm.
by the way that we raise boys and men. And women haven't learned how to learn what they want and ask for what they want. And have been also systematically cut off not so much from their own sensuality, but from their own lusty sexuality.
Mm,
And I think this is particularly true in middle class white women. I don't know as much, I don't know if that's quite as true of other
hmm.
demographic groups, but definitely true of middle class white women.
And do you have a hypothesis of why you think specifically that group are less in touch with what you're saying, their
Yeah,
desires or ability
yeah,
to
I
want?
suspect that it's because we've been taught to be nice
Mm,
and that the job of a woman, now I grew up in 1950s and 60s, so this kind of dated, but I think it still applies.
mhm,
The job of a woman is to be wanted, not to want.
mhm,
And um and to be, pursued and not to pursue.
mhm,
It's just all the same bullshit that we've been raised with. Um,
mhm,
and there's a certain squishing down of enthusiasm about anything. So
mm,
you're not allowed to be big and take up space and make noise, and you're not, it's just kind of frowned upon,
mhm,
and it's not ladylike. And so this applies to sexuality as well.
mhm,
So it means that um, it's not going to be if I'm raised this way, it's not going to be as easy for me to find the lusty part of myself, the part that just wants to, oh yeah, let's do this thing. So
mhm,
it's just going to be harder to access that part of myself.
mhm. I
And I
also
think a
heard
lot of
you.
that is the Puritan culture, basically.
Mhm,
We
mhm.
we we got Puritan culture, and this is one of the results of it down the road.
You see it as a little bit geopolitical in the terms of the United States had this
Mm-hmm.
unique founding and Puritanism,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is going to soak into most parts
Yeah.
of our culture. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you said something interesting too of that men come by this honestly as well,
Mm-hmm.
how they were conditioned. Do you say a little
Yeah.
more about
Yeah.
that?
Men are conditioned to basically not have any feelings, and certainly not have any feelings of tenderness.
Mm,
And so their feelings, this was explained to me by a man who worked in the men's movement a lot. He said that men's culture is basically built on the fact that men have to go to war and kill or be killed.
mm.
So that means that all your relationships with other men are competitive, except you might have a buddy, but most of
An
it's going to be
ally.
competitive, an
Uh-huh.
ally. Um, but you're not going to be able to give in to your feelings of tenderness and fear.
Mm,
So that means you're also not going to be able to give in to your sensory enjoyment very much. Because
mm.
when your sensory enjoyment comes on, your skin, you're going to have feelings. And if you don't want to have feelings, then don't get into your body in
And
that
pay
way.
attention to the messages
Yeah,
you're about.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm, mhm,
And then it also means that if I'm a man and my job is to take the bullets and kill or be killed, then women are now pushed into the role of I have to protect them. So now I'm envious of them because they have it easy.
mm.
And I'm also don't respect them because they're not out there fighting.
There's
So
need, but also
there's
contempt.
need and also
That,
contempt. Yes,
mm,
there's need and contempt. And since I can't have intimacy with other men, I have to have it with women. They're my only source. And because I don't know how to have emotional intimacy, the only kind left is sexual intimacy. And so I have to fuck all the women that I can, but not to get too close to them. And I don't
mhm.
have much sense of my own skin So that doesn't make for very enjoyable sexual experiences
Hmm.
because now I just gotta fucking get it out and get it over with, and um, so all those combined do not make for very satisfying sexual experiences.
Hmm. Hmm. A lot
Yeah,
of the ways we've maybe pre-consciously been conditioned is at play here. You kind of see this as this
yeah, yes.
sociological
Oh yeah,
interplay, of
yeah, yeah,
conditioning. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If we
There's
move,
another
go
piece
ahead.
too. Let
Yeah,
me, that's
tell
just one
me
more piece. There's another
for
piece
sure.
that applies. I've seen it applied to men and women, but especially women. I think it's endemic to women. And that is, as infants, we're touched in ways that we don't want and
Mhm.
don't like and are powerless to prevent. And all through early childhood, it's just a normal part of childhood. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It's
Mhm.
just stuff's going to happen that
We're
you don't
picked
like.
up,
Yeah, we're
patted on the
picked up
cheek.
at, yeah, yeah, yeah. Have our diapers changed. We have our teeth brushed. We
Mhm.
get picked up from hitting our little brother.
Things are like done to
Yeah,
our bodies.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Okay.
And so we learn as pre-verbally,
Mm.
we learn that touch is this thing that happens to us that we don't have any choice about.
Mm.
It's just something that happens, and we have to figure out how to be okay with it somehow.
Mhm. And,
And
and it's
so
it's
that gets installed very early, very deep. Touch is something that you have to put up with in some way.
yeah, and it's not on its own damaging, but I can imagine if another narrative is never introduced of, and now you get to tell me how I
Exactly.
can interact with your body. If that never then gets
Yes,
introduced, we can't
right.
kind of counteract that conditioning of,
Yeah, exactly.
oh, okay,
And
interesting.
many people never have that other narrative introduced.
Yeah, I'd never thought about that
Yeah.
pre-verbal,
Yeah.
how we deal with
Yeah.
touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, and this, where this came to the fore for me in working with clients was that I would ask people, how do you want me to touch you?
Hmm. Hmm.
And they would answer with, well, you can such and such, I guess, which is a different question. I asked what you
Mm.
want, and you answered with what you don't mind terribly much,
What you'd allow.
what you would allow. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Very different question. But it showed me that those things were getting tangled up in there.
Want.
That
Mhm.
that for many people, for many women, and the occasional man, for many women, it never occurred to them that they could be touched the way they wanted. They never had an experience of being touched the way they wanted. Number one, the men didn't know how to ask, or if they asked, the women didn't know how to know what they wanted or say what they wanted, or you know, um, it's a wonder we make any babies.
Something so natural, it's so difficult for many,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so let me move question two. That was all really helpful. I'm glad we added that last part because that was a new idea to me, and I
Hmm.
appreciate having this new awareness or thought. But second question being, I mean, you are an expert in consent. How do you conceptualize the way you think about consent? And I mean, in this study, women said, I consented to something I didn't want. And some people I've
Yeah,
talked
that's
to
it.
have said
Yeah,
that's not actually consent. And some people
yeah,
I've talked to have said, I mean, that's the legal definition. Yeah, but
yeah,
your concept of consent is not allowing.
yeah.
It's being
Yeah,
aware.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
talk a little bit to me about
Sure.
how you think about consent in a way that is new for a lot of us.
Most people, well, after I'd been teaching consent for 15 years, I
Mhm.
decided to go look it up in the dictionary. And I'm glad I did because consent in the dictionary means essentially saying yes. to
Hmm.
something somebody else wants.
Agreeing.
Agreeing.
Mm.
It means I consent to XYZ, means I agree to participate or let XYZ happen. That's a useful place to start, but it sure is not the whole picture.
Hmm.
So, but if based on this pre-verbal growing up that, well, touch is this thing that happens, so I can consent to it means, yeah, it's okay. It's not too terrible. I'm willing to have it happen. Then um, that's, that's technically that's consent. Um, and it's been called this model has been called the gatekeeper model.
Mm.
The woman has the sex, she owns the sex, and the man wants to get the sex from the woman.
Hmm.
So he has to get consent from her somehow so that he can get the sex from her. Um, and so all she can do is open the gate or close the gate. So it's
Yeah.
terribly
I know a
unfair
lot of
because
couples feel that. They
yeah,
wouldn't have the
yeah,
theory name, but they're like, yeah, that's what we
yeah,
experience.
exactly, exactly. And it's unfortunate for her because she doesn't get to ponder what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
She only gets to decide, am I yes to this thing that he wants? Um, so I think if you hear people use the term get consent or give consent, they're talking about the gatekeeper model by
Mm-hmm.
definition. So it's better than nothing, but it's not, it
This
doesn't
is
solve the
the bare
problem.
minimum
Yeah, it's the bare minimum.
to
Yeah,
prevent
yeah.
some
To
harm.
prevent assault. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so the wheel of consent was developed from these two questions. How do you want me to touch you and how do you want to touch me? And and then a conversation, negotiation about what's actually going to happen and then do the thing. And so I named it the wheel of consent because it just seemed to fit. But really, it's more accurately called the wheel of agreement
Mm.
because if consent means the gatekeeper, then I'm not really interested in the gatekeeper model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in what do you want, what do I want, and where do they overlap?
Collaborative equity. How do
Yes.
we,
Yeah.
okay,
What
yeah.
sounds fun to you? What sounds fun to me? Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing. The other thing that people often think consent means permission. If I want to build a shed in my yard, I go get a permit from City Hall. A permit means I am allowed to do the thing that I want to do. So if you're giving me permission, it's because I want to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that applies to some situations, but not other situations. If I ask you to rub my back and you say yes, permission doesn't apply in that dynamic. It just doesn't fit anywhere. So that's so permission is one kind of consent, but it's only one kind out of several
Mm.
kinds. So there's that
Mm.
complexity as well.
I like that you just made what is often a flat word consent dynamic, where there's different
Hmm.
kinds of consent instead of did you
Hmm.
get it, did you not get it, right? Like
Yes,
you just made it go
exactly.
3D, in my
Yeah.
mind, it just popped up like a puffer fish in my
Yeah,
head.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So consent is a hard thing to talk about because you have to define it first.
Hmm.
And even if you define it, people often have a difficult time changing the definition in their minds that they're thinking when you say the word. Um, so, yeah, consent, meaning getting a yes out of someone, is an important first step. and it sure is not the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And as I've read your book and listened to things from you and I use your exercises, I'm so grateful that they're free on your website. I use them with my clients all the
yeah.
time. Like, okay,
Great, great.
print out
Yeah,
Betty's worksheet. Hold on.
yeah.
You know. Um, and after I've had a year and a half of space for my research, and I'm like, what am I going to do to it? I came across your work in that space, that time.
Mm-hmm,
And so I was looking at this of, okay, another way to explain this is when you look at your wheel and there's the four quadrants,
mm-hmm,
the long-term pattern for these women is they were the allowers, the husband
mm-hmm,
was the takers. And
mm-hmm.
in your model, that's not in and of itself terrible, but if that's all we have
If that's all you
happening,
have, you're going to get bored.
and
Mm-hmm,
maybe even that's why some of, they were all scored severe to moderate on the
mm-hmm,
PT, I mean, on a PTSD screener that
mm,
they were avoiding it, they were developing an
yeah,
aversion to it,
yeah,
they were getting
yeah.
anxious about it, they were crying during or after. Like,
Oh,
and so I see this and I'm like, is this what, if we don't use the whole wheel and we stay stuck
mm-hmm,
in allow and take,
mm-hmm,
which
mm-hmm.
sometimes is healthy. There was
Yeah, yeah,
30% of women who said, this is fine, this isn't a problem for me.
yeah,
But the 70% of women who said, this over time pushed me outside that circle that you've driven,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
On the outside of that allow
Exactly.
take is
Is putting up
harm.
with, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Harms one or
yeah,
person or it harms a
yeah,
relationship.
yeah, yeah.
Had you thought about what happens when I mean, you drew the
Oh
circle
yeah,
so well.
people get stuck in one. And one problem is that whichever one you feel like you're in, you're going to assume your partner's in the other one.
Oh,
So if you feel like you're allowing, and really you're more kind of in the muddy edge of putting up with, if you feel like you're in allowing, you're going to assume your partner's in taking, but they may not be there. Chances are they think they're in serving because
okay.
they're trying to do the right thing.
You're like blowing my mind because I didn't know how to put that into words. Is I'm thinking, okay, but we don't have 1,300 predatory partners in my research.
Right?
That
No,
couldn't
no,
have
we don't.
happened spontaneously.
Yeah,
And a lot of couples I'm working with are like good people. It's the
yeah,
dynamic that's really crappy. But you're saying the
yeah,
woman's going to perceive him as taking and
yeah.
selfish and entitled, but he may not be selfish and entitled. He may
Right,
think he's
right.
serving
He
her.
may think he's serving because he's doing what he saw in the video that women are supposed to like.
Yeah.
But he didn't ask her what she wanted, or if he did, she didn't know how to say.
Yeah.
And so she's silently putting up with what she thinks he wants when he's trying to do what he thinks she wants.
I'm giggling because I'm remembering a couple and she said, "Oh, but he's so generous. He'll go down on me for like 30 minutes." And I said, "Do you like oral sex?" And she said, "No, I don't." Like
Oh,
then how is he so generous?
generous. Yeah,
He thinks
yeah,
he's doing this for her and
yeah,
she knows it's not for her.
yeah,
But it doesn't have to be
yeah.
nefarious or predatory
That's
or
right. Yeah,
selfish or
yeah.
mm,
In most cases, it's not, I think.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
yeah. I mean, of course, some people can be jerks. We can all be jerks, but
mm-hmm,
for the most part, I think it's just a misunderstanding and a trying to figure out how to do the right thing.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
yeah. And going back to men who, if if you're if your uh, if your access to intimacy, kindness, affirmation, play, connection, um, recognition, sensuality. If you don't have any way to access those except for sex, which is the case for most men,
mm-hmm,
then your sex isn't really about sex either. It's about all those other things. But you have to get sex because it's your only route to a feeling of connection. You have to get it.
mm-hmm.
because you don't know and you haven't developed any other routes to experience connection or intimacy or play or affirmation or anything else. And so I think that's one reason why men tend to be so focused on sex to the exclusion of other forms of physical intimacy. Um, Probably it's partly testosterone too, but
Mm.
I think it's largely um, just encultured that
Mhm.
there's no other way to get those things but sex, and so you got to get it.
I'm sure you could talk for hours. Maybe might be
I
assuming,
probably
but
could.
and I would listen for hours. Um, do you think is it too simplistic for me to say to think about like, okay, consenting to unwanted sex, that's similar to gatekeeping sex, that's similar to staying stuck in the allow take position.
Mhm.
Are we using a lot of different terms for the same thing?
I think people are sufficiently different and their situations are sufficiently different
Hmm.
that it's fair to say with one person, here's the main dynamic. And with another person, this is slightly maybe similar dynamic, but this is the other thing that's going on. Or for one person, the husband is just desperate for some kind of connection at all. And the wife resents that because he didn't pick up his socks. And
Hmm.
so, now there's, or in another instance, he is very generous, but she grew up with some shame and doesn't know how to enjoy something or let herself enjoy it. And so she gets tense, and
Hmm.
then he's going to get tense. So, these the dynamics that we're describing are kind of like templates that these dynamics under underscore a lot of other things, but each individual couple is going to have different things that are more or less important. And I think they're slightly different things. Like the take allow
Yeah.
dynamic is a really important, and a lot of people can't find it, and it's missing.
Oh,
Most people can't find it. And most men have a lot of trouble finding and experiencing the take quadrant because it requires a certain degree of sensory skill. And if you
okay,
can't
tell me
find it,
more about that because I'm thinking, oh, that's the most common dynamic is the man is
yeah,
in the taking
no,
and the woman's in the
no,
allowing. So tell me
no.
more about that.
The
Yeah.
most common dynamic is that he thinks he's serving and she thinks she's allowing.
Okay, that's the more common
So
dynamic.
neither of them are receiving what they want. That's the most common dynamic.
Yeah, no one's receiving.
No one's receiving. Yeah. The take quadrant, if I'm going to feel you up,
Hmm.
then my hands have to be actually able to take in the data of what your skin feels like.
Hmm.
If I can't take in the data of what your skin feels like, I'm not going to be able to feel you up. I'm going to be doing things to you, but it's not landing anywhere. I'm always thinking, is this good for her? Is this good for her? Is this good for her? I can't actually drink you up the way taking would have me do. So most men have a hard time accessing the take quadrant, and it takes a little bit of training.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And when it does click, it's usually a huge aha. It's very often an emotional response to it,
Hmm.
and it totally changes their sensual relationship because then they both are able to have fun.
Hmm.
Women usually learn to take pretty quick because their hands are more likely to be awake. Um, yeah, in any given heterosexual couple, the woman will almost always click first.
Does sexual entitlement live in take
It
or
lives in the shadow of take.
that shadow of take?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's so common that we assign intentions to other people. I'm hearing
Mm-hmm.
you say one of the things that have to happen is getting really clear and
Mm-hmm.
open to my partner's intentions might be very different than the one I've assigned to them. Because I might be thinking that they're
Absolutely.
taking and they're
Absolutely.
just struggling and struggling to try to serve or to find the
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that'll.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Um,
That is, that opens up a lot more room for men in this conversation that I think, rightly so, we need to vilify sexual harm. But I don't know if you could, I'm not being very eloquent at all.
I see
But
your brains going.
you did. It just opened up so much more non-judgment for the male in this situation
Mm,
that in these
mm-hmm,
conversations, it's often loaded with judgment for the male.
mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
And understandably so, because if men are conditioned to desperately need some kind of connection and also to believe that they deserve it and they get to have it
mm,
because women owe it to them. So it's a setup for entitlement.
mhm,
And then you combine that with not really having the skill to know or to help your woman figure out what she likes. That's another setup.
mhm.
And then another setup is that the woman is trained to not want anything or to have or to expect that he will know how to do the right thing miraculously because she doesn't know. And so he when he doesn't know, then she gives up.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is a setup, really. Um, and it's easy to see how each of them can blame the other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the gridlock sets in and
Hmm. Yeah, and then it's really hard. But I've been there. I do not recommend
yeah.
it. It's like, oh, here we go again. It's really
Mhm.
hard to come at it with fresh eyes. Yeah.
When you're working with a couple who's stuck in what you see is really common, the allow, serve, and
Hmm.
it's not going well, it's not producing desired results for either
Hmm.
party.
Hmm.
What's your treatment plan? Where do you start? Where do you go?
3-minute game.
The 3-minute game is where we start.
It's pretty
Hmm.
much the treatment plan for everybody
Okay.
because well, I first start with waking up the hands
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then the 3-minute game or some, variation of it
Hmm.
because every relationship dynamic will show up in one of those quadrants.
In those 3 minutes.
In those, yeah,
Mm.
because okay, now as part of the game, I'm asking you, how do you want me to touch you? And then all your stuff comes up about, oh, well, I don't deserve this, or am I asking for too much, or I don't know, or blah, all that stuff. It's going to show up right there.
Mhm. Or this is
And
what he
that
wants.
yeah, right. How maybe I can guess the right thing so that he wants it,
Mm.
even though it's supposed to be for me, it's all going to show up right there.
Hmm.
And same thing when I ask how you want to touch me. Now, it's going to come up for me is, oh shit, now what do I have to say yes to everything?
Hmm.
And what if I don't like it? And what should I do? And, and if someone asks me how I want to touch them, like, do I get to admit that I actually want to? I don't know how to actually touch them for me. I only know how to do the strokes and
Hmm.
or I don't know how to respect the limits that they've set.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
all going to show up in one of those quadrants or the other. Yeah. So it pretty much the 3-minute game is the solution to everything.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What's the solution to preventing this? Like that's when people have already gotten here from the
Hmm.
socialization that we've established as a country. What what's the answer to preventing? the dynamic from settling
Mm.
in, do you think, in the
Well, I
first place?
think a lot of things. A 3-minute game,
You would do it
because
as a parent with kids?
yeah, you can do it
Yeah.
with kids as long as you're asking them what they want and they don't
Hmm.
ask you what you want.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You keep
What
the
do you want to
roles.
do to me? I want to pull your hair. I want to climb all over you. Imagine if people who were just starting to date were playing this, like they'd learn pretty quick that they have a boundary and they better respect the other person's boundary and, you know, that there's fun things to do that don't involve sex and yeah.
Hmm.
Well, one of the benefits of the 3-minute game for a couple is that if you if you take sex off the table, take genital contact off the table for the
Hmm.
first 50 times you play it,
Hmm.
you discover that there's a lot of fun things to do to each other that don't involve the genitals. And so your repertoire just grows like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I liked to have my legs massaged.
Hmm.
And now it's my favorite thing. All these options arise that you didn't see before.
Yeah, and we get to
Yeah.
have this
Yeah. And
whole
you get to
list
have a
of pleasure
playtime.
that isn't
Yeah.
focused on orgasm, that, oh, my
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So some of the prevention would be we need to learn as a culture how to respect people's limits when they
Mm-hmm.
set them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this big missing piece of the sensory
We,
wisdom of being connected to our own
yeah. Yeah.
bodies.
Yeah. And I would say I think I don't have data for this, but I think that for most people who showed up to my studio to get sex coaching, the sex wasn't actually the problem.
Hmm.
The and I write about this in the book somewhere, how to be comfortable in your skin, that's the problem. Or how to be comfortable with wanting, that's the problem.
Mm.
Or how to be able to communicate what you want, that's the problem. And it's just that those things didn't show up until sex was around. But those are actually the problem. They're not about sex.
Mm.
They're about being human and living in your skin and learning to be comfortable with your own emotions and your own discomfort and um, uh, being comfortable with the fact that there's something you want and
Hmm.
being comfortable with the fact that your partner may want something different than you and being comfortable with the fact that there's things that your partner's not available for and having the skill to converse about those things. Those
Hmm.
things are not about sex, but they show up around sex. So people think the problem is sex.
Right.
And
Right.
I tend to think the problem that's underneath that is how to be a sensual, decent human being and communicate with other human beings and learn how to be honest about what you want and learn how to respect what the other person wants and learn how to let the other person feel what they feel without trying to fix it all the time.
Hmm.
Or learn how to feel what you feel without trying to blame it on the other person all the time.
Mm.
Those things are relationship skills,
Right.
which are not so much about sex, but I can't imagine how you're going to have good sex without them.
Mm. Hmm.
That's my own bias.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that leads us to this question. You answered a little bit, but you know, your thoughts on the DSM having a diagnosis for hypoactive desire disorder.
Oh
And you're,
God.
tell me more.
There may be such a thing,
Hmm.
but in my working with clients, I don't think there is. I think, okay, if you say, well, this person doesn't desire sex, so therefore they're broken.
Hmm.
Well, first of all, what is sex? And it may be that you don't desire this kind of sex.
Hmm.
Well, good for you, because that kind of sex is lousy.
It's not worth wanting.
It's not worth wanting. I think Schnarch came up with that too.
Uh-huh.
It's not worth wanting.
Hmm.
But because you don't know that this whole other realm of really fun sex exists. So you don't know that it's there that could be wanted. So that's one part of it is that, yeah, you don't want sex because the sex you were having wasn't worth wanting. And then there's this other things that could be considered sex that just never occurred to you. So, yeah, I think that's a ridiculous thing. The other thing is, another way to look at it is there's something that you want. It may not be sex the way you have always had it, but there's something that you want. And what is that something? That's a much more interesting question. Maybe you want some cuddles that are
Mm.
not sex. Maybe you want a foot rub. Maybe you want help getting the kids to bed. Maybe you want someone to read you a story. So you put your head in their lap and have them read you a story.
Mm.
Maybe you want someone to sing a song for you. Maybe there's something that you want. And we are describing it as if the only thing that counts is if you want penetrative intercourse.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
That's just so ridiculously narrow.
and we'll
Yeah.
use the word intimacy as like a code word, like
Yeah.
this for
Yeah.
sex,
That's ridiculous.
right? Yeah.
Like we're grown-ups, let's use a word that means what it means. And the other approach to the question is if the sex that you were having is not worth wanting, then it's actually a good sign that you don't want it.
Yeah.
It's a good sign that you don't want it.
Yeah. Instead of a diagnosis
Yeah, yeah. So
of something going wrong, it's, yeah.
what you need to do is experiment and discover things that are enjoyable, whether they're sex or not.
And that makes sense to me, but say a little bit more because, like, a reader or listener might be like, what do you mean, Betty, that it's a good thing? I don't want this. It's causing it's causing decades of conflict
Hmm.
or, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's causing conflict because it's the conflict is an opportunity to look a little deeper
Hmm.
and look a little deeper at what actually might you enjoy. Maybe it's taking a walk, you know, or to what other ways might you meet those needs for closeness, or what other ways might you need meet the needs for touch? Maybe you give each other a massage or read each other naughty stories.
Mhm.
There's lots of things that can be sexual that are enjoyable that are not intercourse, and there are lots of things that are not sexual
Mhm. Mhm. But
that
enjoyable.
that are enjoyable and build closeness, intimacy, connection, pleasure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
And instead of sending the message of you're broken, you're
mhm.
saying this could
Yeah,
be
this is an
everything going
opportunity.
right. This is
Yeah,
your body and your
yeah.
mind telling you,
I mean,
no.
imagine if you had a, I never thought of this before, but imagine if you had a diagnosis that said, there's something wrong with you. You don't like acid poured on your skin.
You get blisters,
Yeah, like what's wrong with you?
you
You know,
cry.
yeah. Like
Oh,
you would say
mm,
if you don't like acid poured on your skin, good for you.
good for
That's a
you.
good sign. Yeah,
Everything's working exactly how it should.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's not conducive to skin. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
I
But
like
I
that.
think that conflict is true. It's a hard, hard place for a couple to be. And some couples are willing to do the work and some aren't.
Mm.
That's just the way some individuals are willing to do the work and some aren't. That's just the way it is.
Mm.
But it's an opportunity to look deeper into what actually might we like, what actually might meet the need for closeness, connection, fun, play, lots of ways to meet those needs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Did you have any additional thoughts that I didn't necessarily ask you directly after, sent you this video and I'm like, we found this thing, these women are scoring really high in all these PTSD
Mm-hmm.
areas
Mm-hmm.
based on this pattern and ask you to help me make sense of it. Did you have
Mm-hmm.
any other like kind of
Mm.
op-ed thoughts that I didn't think to ask you that came up for you?
Yeah, just that I feel sad for all those women because
Yeah,
I've been there. I know how it is, and
yeah.
yeah, it's easy for me to say, well, here's some things you can try and stuff, but I there's I know that anytime you pull a thread in a relationship, it's going to pull down to all kinds of other things that you may or may not want to deal with.
Mhm.
And so, saying that here's an opportunity to go deeper is shit. Not everybody wants to do that. And every thread that you pull is going to, it's going to connect to some other thread that goes down in there. And yeah, I don't know any solution to that.
I kind of hear
Yeah.
you saying you're recognizing this isn't simple. This is
This is not
complex.
simple. It is
That
not
even though the
simple.
3-minute game is a simple game, the
Yeah.
whole process of turning this around is going to be
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's going to bring up all your stuff
You're gonna
and
bring
you're
up
going
all
to
your
end
stuff.
up in therapy
Hmm.
and you're going to end up what was really helpful for me and I think it is for a lot of people is various workshops on things like radical honesty was really helpful. I spent 40 years co-counseling and lots of workshops in there and
Mm-hmm.
body electric workshops, dealing with specifically with eroticism and um, that just there's all kinds of workshops and things that one can do to increase their self-awareness, thankfully,
Hmm.
um, as well as personal therapy. Body work was a big one for me, and becoming embodied in terms of movement and learning how to listen to what my body was telling me. All those things were factors um, that at this point, I can't imagine
Hmm.
not having that.
They were foundational
They
to
were
your work.
foundational. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And are some of these workshops open to non-practitioners? Like,
Oh, yeah, most of them
yeah.
are. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Because I'm
yeah.
like a lot of somatic stuff training. It's like licensed therapists only. But
Oh,
these kinds of
yeah,
workshops you're mentioning,
yeah,
anybody could access.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I'm sure there are lots more of them now, even than when I was in the workshop scene.
Hmm. Maybe so.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
there are a lot more now.
When we release this podcast, I too want people to know how to find you. You've got a book, you've got a website. You're talking to a lot of people right now since your book came
Hmm.
out. I've seen you
Hmm.
pop up on my You've got a lot of free printables too, right? I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah,
and all your videos really walk people through the book
yeah,
if they aren't
yeah,
wanting to read it. I found that really helpful.
yeah. There's 8 hours of free video on
Mm-hmm.
bettymartin.org.
It's very generous.
Just walks you right through it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's a book, and at the book website, you can download the first chapter for free, and
Okay.
you can download a chart of the Wheel of Consent. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. I really value your time. I really appreciate you being willing to talk to me.
You are so welcome.
If I'm being radically honest, I was like,
Thanks. It's fun to be able to talk about all this relationship and sexuality stuff and kind of take it apart because it's
Mhm.
not very often that I get a chance to talk about it all at once. So it's been
Mhm.
fun. Yeah,
Good, good.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you so
yeah.
much. Okay. All right. Thanks so
Great,
much. It's good
Cami.
to meet
Nice to
you.
see you again. Yep.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.